I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are listening to the Postcast, presented by the Locked On Senators podcast, and of course, the Glebe Central Pub. I'm your host, Brandon Piller, joined by Jack Richardson for a disappointing night for the Ottawa Senators as they let the Vegas Golden Knights walk away with the 6-4 victory. Jack, this is a game with a lot of momentum swings. Obviously, a 6-4 game when you got 10 goals in one game in a barn as energetic as it is over in Vegas. You're going to have all these swings, but unfortunately, the Ottawa Senators aren't able to hold on to the lead when it matters. And quickly, not once, but twice, Vegas scores back-to-back goals to get themselves in it and then put themselves ahead and close this game out. How you feeling right now, buddy? I know it's hard every time I have you on here and it's just you and me. We got to chop up a crap game, but how you feeling?
It's a little bit of shell shock, I got to be honest. Like it was right at the end of the game too. Like if it was earlier in the third and then they kind of rode that one out, it's different, but I'm still kind of processing what we watched because quite frankly, other than the last 3 minutes of the first period, minus Batherson's goal, which I don't know if we're going to go through every goal, but like that stretch was bad in the first period. And then obviously the implosion at the end of the game there. This was a great game. Like they were dominating stretches of this game against a very good Vegas team in a very hard place to play, like you said. So dealing with what happens tough. I can't imagine the team. So this is going to be a real interesting test going into Colorado, just seeing how they respond, because this is a game that they've played in years past. This looked, I said immediately when we got in here, this feels familiar, not only for the two of us, not only for me on the Postcast, but just the team in general, this core. Like they play these great games. They don't stretch 60 minutes together, but it's hard to do that. They just feels like they don't get the breaks. Something goes wrong, and you're sitting here wondering, how did we lose that game? 2 points down the drain, and they're 4-3 instead of 5-2.
Yeah, 5-2 would have been so nice to see in the standings. And our guy Adam says, Pillsy, I cannot express the hate that I have for this game and Cousins and team soon. This team ain't it, or is it overhyped to heck? I think we can get into the overhypeness a little bit here because so far this season, we only had Allmark for 2 games. He signs that big extension, wins one game, loses another. Then the strain pops up. Forsberg has to step in, doesn't go great, and then he has the shutout in Utah, and now Allmark's back, and you're thinking, okay, if this team was able to have success, back-to-back wins without their all-star Vezina winning goalie, surely when he gets back and they're able to produce offensively, they can shut the door on teams and win these types of games, especially when they had the lead or at least were in control of the game for a lot of it in this one, and up against a good Vegas team that has had their number. It seemed, Jack, like they were finally going to do some curse breaking here, but ultimately, Linus Ullmark doesn't end up being a difference maker in this game. I mean, Vegas scores 6 goals, not all of them on Ullmark, obviously, but what do you feel about Ullmark at this point? Is it like I was saying to you and Ross, I'm chalking this game up as he's a little rusty coming off a strain injury, and maybe he's not he doesn't have his timing right or something like that. That's the spin zone excuse I'm going for. How are you feeling about it, Jack?
Maybe, man. Maybe there's something in that Montreal game too, because outside of the home opener, he's played 3 games now. It's kind of been a mixed opinion for me. Like again, like you said, most of those goals tonight probably not on him, but it hasn't felt like he's been in there to steal games, really, other than that home opener. And you're we've got conversations about if the team's overhyped and everything. I think that expectations were pretty moderate considering the move that was made to get him and the core that the team has. They take a step, and like I said, they looked good. They looked really good tonight for most of the game. The top players in like for the most part, I thought Tim Stützle looked fantastic tonight. Like I was not high on his game a few weeks ago against the Devils, just because I thought he kind of didn't rise to the occasion, but I thought he was everywhere tonight. So like guys like that, I know Sanderson had a bit of a tough night in the plus minus category, but I still didn't think he played a terrible game. the guys who need to play well, I feel like are Drake Batherson's been great. Claude Giroux's been back ever since that giveaway against the Devils. But it just feels like Ullmark's still finding his game, and that could be injury related. It could be something else. I don't know, but this is certainly not something I saw coming. I think the reason this team might have been so hyped coming in, or overhyped, if some fans might want to say that, is because of the prospect of adding a guy like Linus Ullmark to the team. And again, not on him completely. Like, there's breakdowns that happen. That penalty by Nick Cousins is brutal. It can't happen at that time of the game, especially by a guy who has that kind of pedigree with him, right? Where, and I'm saying pedigree just because he's won a Stanley Cup. So he's been in these games that you need to close out last minute. Taking an interference call like that, it's getting called every time. 5 minutes left in the third period. You can't do that when you're up by 1. So that was tough. Yeah, like, it's just with Ullmark, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not a goalie guy. I don't know. I'm frustrated watching those goals go in because, again, it feels like the same thing we've seen year after year with this team. We've seen stretches of great play, and then back-breaking goals that go in the net. And I know that, again, I keep repeating it, but, I did this with Korpisalo last year, where you're sitting there going, hey, can't have that one. It's not all on him or something like that. You're making excuses, it feels like. And I don't think we're there with Ullmark yet, but it's a slippery slope. And I don't know how long it's going to be, but he didn't provide that goaltending tonight. He had an 8-15. And at the end of the day, that's not going to cut it. You score 4 goals against the Vegas Golden Knights. That should be enough to win you a hockey game. And unfortunately it wasn't. Last thing I'll say though, maybe this is the Sens' bad, good luck kind of catching up with them. They've had a lot of these high scoring games go in their favor. So maybe that's kind of the reverse of that now, but tough one to swallow. I'm still kind of coming to terms with it. That's what the postcast is for though, Pilsy.
We vent to revive, and we can vent here along with 164 other Sens fans. And I think, Jack, the difference is last year you grew to expect these collapses, especially against good teams, because the goaltending was so bad. Like, you knew the Sens had offensive power, that they could score goals, but it was inevitable that goalies, whether it was Korpisalo or Forsberg, were going to give up weak goals and you're going to fall behind. And most of the time, you never even had the lead to begin with. So it's not like you were like, oh, we were going to win this game and then we lost it. Like, 2 shots in, Sens fans are like, well, this is over. But then you bring in a guy like Ullmark, and you don't mess around either. You give him a 4-year extension right off the hop before he even plays a regular season game. And he's not able to close out games like this. Like, I'm not going to say necessarily Ullmark is the reason they lost this game. But when you're a goalie of his pedigree and has expectations like he does, he needs to be a reason why you win games. And it's unfortunate that the Sens let this one slip away. And I think there's a couple TSN turning points of the game. Jack, I'll let you decide if there was one turning point for you. I think I have an idea what it might be, but I've got one in mind specifically for me here.
I got to be honest, I don't have one specific moment in the game. Like, the Cousins penalty feels a little too late for a TSN turning point, but that might have been the one. Like, the momentum was real. And I don't know if you saw, but this is kind of off topic, but there's been a discussion about momentum in sports not being real. Right. And just look at tonight. Like, it's so obvious that it's real in the building, the fans. Yeah. It's one of the hardest places to play. I think
it can't be statistically measured, but I think people that are at games and players and coaches, it's a crazy thing to say it's not real at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yeah, so I don't really have a specific moment. You know what I will point to, actually, and I'm not trying to harp on Matt Murray, I said Matt Murray. There's someone in the chat. No. I can't believe I just did that. No. Can't believe I just did that. But there's so many things, because I'm feeling the same thing. Like Steve just said in the chat, like Matt Murray played well for a lot of the time, and then he let in those goals. Linus Ullmark is not Matt Murray yet, because he's playing better than Matt Murray ever did. I think still. I want to take that back. But there was a moment.
Freudian slip, though. You were thinking about Matt Murray with your example there.
I'll tell you why. That play in the third period where Ullmark has it with his glove and it just trickles by the post. To me, that I was feeling that I'm like, oh, he didn't know where the puck was. And then there was a couple where it went off the glass that, Pietrangelo ripped one that went off the glass, and he just looked a little uncomfortable. So I'm going to point to those plays maybe as being a TSN turning point, because I think Vegas might have gotten an idea like, hey, just rip the puck high. I don't know. And that's just to me where I felt a little bit less confident in the Sens pulling this game out, because like I said, when they had the puck on their stick, I felt very good. Forecheck was great. Offensive zone was fantastic. So not Matt Murray, but a play that reminded me of it, just the glove hand not being there and a little bit of a trickle that could have gone in. And that if that goes in, maybe it's a different story. But what did you have in mind for the TSN turning point?
Well, I mean, it's directly related to the Cousins penalty because that gives Vegas the power play. But for me, I kind of thought the Sens were going to be able to kill that penalty, especially when Shabbat had that moment where he cleared the puck and then it wasn't a penalty. I'm not sure what side of that I'm on, whether that was supposed to be or not. It's kind of hard to tell from TV, the angles and stuff, but whatever. The Sens get the luck. It's not a penalty. So you're like, okay, sweet. Now we just got to kill off this 5-on-4 rather than it being a long 5-on-3. And for me, the fourth goal was the TSN turning point because not only is it a power play goal that obviously erupts the building and ties the game up late, that's very clear, but it was just Vegas was able to score that with such ease and precision that it was such a sick goal that it just totally boosted all their momentum and it really rallied the fans and the team. And then it doesn't take much longer for them to get the fifth and then the fifth and sixth goal were 1 minute apart. Like, you go from leading a game 4-3, and then you take a terrible penalty in Nick Cousins' interference. Like, that's just a penalty you can't take. And especially, you mentioned it, like, this is a guy with Stanley Cup winning experience, albeit I think he only played one game in the final, maybe because coaching staff wasn't sure if they could trust him in big moments. And he's elevated from the fourth line role to playing on a top line with the lead. And he goes and pulls a move like that, just a completely unnecessary penalty like that. And it was only their second penalty of the game. I mentioned today in our episode of Locked On Senators podcast, my key to victory was discipline because the Vegas Golden Knights are one of the best power play teams in the league, along with the Ottawa Senators, and they don't take a lot of penalties. They were 29th in the league in most penalties taken, only 16 all year. So that was an issue where if you're going to beat this team, you cannot make those crucial little mistakes that will give them the advantage. And they're such a top-heavy team. Like that top power play unit, you're looking at, I don't know who plays defense, but the trio that cashed in on the goal, Eichel, Hurdle, and Stone, like they just proved to you how dangerous they are when they get the opportunity. And there was a bang play. So that goal, when they tied it, I just had the feeling that it was over. I didn't think they were going to carry it into overtime and squeak a win or even just get a loser point or bring it to shootout or whatever. It just seemed like that was Vegas being like, all right, we let Ottawa have the lead most of this game. We've been playing around, but it's time to really get going here and put the pedal to the metal. And then of all things that happened, it's a fourth line goal that is the game winner. And it's a goal where Keegan Kolesar is all alone on that side. And sure, he's a fourth line guy, but we've seen examples like Zach McEwen when he has time and space.
Adam Gaudette tonight.
Adam Gaudette. Yeah, the hockey god. 2 goals.
I was getting ready to talk about the fourth line for the Sens and having 2 goals and what a win, like the depth, and then Keegan Kolesar.
If you give these players the opportunities, they can cash in even on a goalie as good as Allmark. Like, so that's where it's frustrating because that was a bit of a defensive breakdown as well. Kolesar shouldn't have not been that open, obviously, but I think it's just so frustrating because these losses that you let slip away are going to come back to haunt you as points get so crucial when you're leading up to playoff games. And obviously, like, it's not like at the end of the season, you're going to be like, man, October 25th, we let the Vegas Golden Knights get away with it. Like, it's not that specific, but it can come down to 1 or 2 points at the end of the season. And it's games that you let slip like this that could end up costing you.
I think there's a lot of I'm looking at the chat kind of as we're talking here, and I feel like after losses like this, the chat is kind of where we need to look because just getting the sense of how fans are feeling, and I'm seeing a lot of Travis Green. You know, it's worth talking about. I think I've got something I want to say about Travis Green, not related to Nick Cousins. I know that there's a lot of questions about him being elevated to that top line. But I mentioned it even before we started recording. Like, I thought they looked great in the third period. I didn't think that Amadio looked terrible with Stutzle and Tkachuk this game, but they thought a change needed to be made and they put Cousins up there. And in the third period, I thought they were great. They were down low. They were in the offensive zone the whole time. But then that penalty is brutal. So I'm curious how that's going to work out if he comes out, if everyone's healthy. My issue with Travis Green in this game is when you lose a game like that, we talked about momentum, and you finish it with a timeout in your back pocket. I feel like a timeout would have been okay.
Fair point.
Maybe not after that fourth goal, because then you're kind of waving the white flag a little bit. I think the group would have been okay. After that fifth goal, you need a timeout.
I agree.
There's no reason to not use one and then pull the goalie on right after the puck drops, right? With 2 minutes left, I would have appreciated a timeout to just the building would have kept going, but just calm your group down a little bit. Like that's what timeouts are for, right? They're for when you need to either get a goal late in the third period like they needed to. I don't know if Travis Green was just shell-shocked, if it's a message to the team, but that's a spot I would have liked to see them just take a breather. Like, you've got all these guys. I was going to make a comment about the way they were defending. It looked like they were playing a playoff game. Like, it looked like they had a lot on the line. It looked like the Sens did. And I had to be honest. I felt like the Golden Knights were a little disinterested. It looked like at times, right? Where it's a game in October for a Stanley Cup winning team.
And a 3 o'clock local start.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just felt like the Sens were on it. They were blocking everything. They were in lanes. That penalty kill was great. I would have loved a timeout there from Travis Green just to settle things down, but unfortunately didn't get one. And maybe it's a different story. Like, you just never know, right? You call a timeout, you lose, whatever. But maybe it's a message sent by him. I don't know what you thought about that.
No, that's a good point. Like, it is weird when you come away with slipping a game like that and you got your time out of your back pocket, especially in a building as energetic as Vegas. Like, even if you just take a bit of air out of that balloon, like, I think that would be a good call. So, unfortunately, the Ottawa Senators let this one slip. 6-4. The Vegas Golden Knights beat the Sens. And on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about our Sen Central standouts of the game and break down what we think the Sens can improve on as things don't get easier for them as they head to Denver up against the Colorado Avalanche, a team that's been struggling a bit this year, but nonetheless has high-end talent similar to the Golden Knights. Another spot that has high-end talent is the Glebe Central Pub, when all you beauties in the Postcast are there at 779 Bank Street. The Glebe Central Pub is the official sponsor of the Postcast, and we love our pub in the heart of the Glebe. They got great food, great drinks, great service, and they love Sens fans. They love Sens fans so much that they've got the Sens shuttle. You can take the bus with Sue, legendary bus driver, and she will take you from the pub. So go to the pub early, have a couple drinks, have dinner, then hop on the bus. $17 round trip. The bus takes you to the CTC. Watch the game, enjoy it. Don't worry about driving home or being worried about parking or anything like that. The bus takes care of it, and then it brings you right back to the pub after, where you can celebrate the victory, or misery loves company. You can get together with Sens fans and vent about it just like you do here on the Postcast. So shout out to the Glebe Central Pub, 779 Bank Street. If you go there, let them know the Locked On Senators podcast sent you. You can see our Locked On GCP jersey framed in the bar there. So go check them out at 779 Bank Street. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, if you feel that momentum swing, Jack, which we know is real, gamblers especially, you could feel the momentum feel. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Adam Gaudette to score a hat trick was a big bet people were looking at tonight, and you could have checked it out too at FanDuel.com. All right, Jack, I'm so sorry that once again we do I was going to say late night postcast, a Western time zone postcast because it's not that late. And we end up talking about 3 usual things. Disappointment. That kind of sums it up, actually. It's usually just some sort of disappointment.
Just go on synonyms.com and look up disappointment. Yeah. Every word you see will be when Pilsy and I do a postcast about the Sens. It's just, that's the vibe we give. But we're here to give it, which is the fun part. I mean, we're going to do it no matter what. I really did think this was going to be a win. This is probably going to be up there with the most heartbreaking postcast one I've done, like where it's a last minute, not even an overtime loss, just rip the 2 points out from under you. Before we get into our Sen Central standouts, I have a quote from Linus Ullmark post game here. This is from Graham Creech with TSN 1200. Linus Ullmark put that loss on himself, telling @Gord Wilson, if they had a capable goalie in there, they would have won 4-3 today. So look, to me, that's what you want to hear. And again, like, I don't know many goalies that come out here and say that, do media after a tough loss like that. I don't know how often that would happen for the Sens in years past. So look, it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme. But I think that's, look, if he's putting it on himself, that's a leader. That's kind of all you can ask for after something like that. So happy to hear that. I think, even though I wish that it didn't happen and didn't have to be that way, but it is still good to hear that from Ullmark, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a goalie that has high expectations of himself as well. In a 6-4 loss where the Sens outshoot the Vegas Golden Knights 38-28, and you allow 6 goals. Not great. The power play, 50-50 for both teams, 50-50 PK as well. Sens not so great in the face-off dot, although got to give stick taps to Josh Norris going 13 for 22, good for 59% in the face-off dot. Blocks, the Ottawa Senators were doing what they can to block shots, 20-12 in favor of the Sens. Lots of physicality in this one, 28 hits for the Sens, 32 for the Vegas Golden Knights. And the 5-on-5 expected goals percentage, actually pretty close in this one with the Sens 52, the Vegas Golden Knights with 48%. Yeah, Jack, as this game was going on and I was feeling good, the Sens were going to win, I was already like trying to think of like clever opening lines. Like I was going to open up with the hockey god punishes Sin City. Like that, I thought that was a good one. And like, that would have been really emphatic play on words to go with. But here we are in a loss. So I couldn't hit the people with that big line, but I think that can lead us into our Sens Central standouts though. Although it was a disappointing loss, there were some players that stood out. Do you want to take the easy one, or do you have a more in-depth one?
You go ahead. I kind of want to talk about. I already mentioned him earlier, but you go ahead with the good. We could talk about. There was some good stuff. Why don't we focus on a little bit of the positive? Like they played well today, so we can. Why don't we bang out 2 of them? There's only 2 of us. We take 2 each. If you have 2, I don't know if you do.
But... I got 1.
Okay, you go. I'll say mine, and then maybe we can find some other diamonds in the rough in that game.
Yeah, people in the chat, if you got other Sens Central standouts, let us know. But I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit if you're offering it to me, Jack, because it's Adam Gaudette, 2 goals. And, I mean, pretty nice goals as well. I think this is the exact kind of game he needed. He's a guy that was brought in so that the fourth line didn't just have a Parker Kelly, Mark Kastelic, Zach McEwen vibe to it, which... Hey, a lot of fourth lines in the league. It's just grinding tough guys. And that's no disrespect to Mark Kastelic. He's lighting it up in Boston. So it's not to say that he can't put up points once in a while as well and still play that physical game. But the Sens wanted to switch things up a little, and they bring Adam Gaudette in to add his goal scoring punch. And he also plays on the power play. But 2 goals, and then I thought he was going to have a nice chance where on the power play, he actually ends up dishing it to Amadio backdoor, but it bobbles on Amadio, so he can't get it. But I thought if you have a hat trick there, you go for the heat check shot and just throw it on net, but he tried to be a team player. But yeah, Adam Gaudette, 2 goals, and I believe he hadn't scored an NHL goal since like 2022 or something. So it had been a long time coming for the hockey god, and it's nice for players to get that off their back. I'm sure it's a big relief for him.
I do also want to shout out just on that line, that first goal from Gaudette, Cole Reinhardt with an unreal pass for his first career NHL point. He looked good tonight too, flying around, a bit more noticeable in the first period, but that makes it now 7 players from the 2020 draft to get a point for the Senators. Yep. And I think I was seeing Ross tweet those out that's the most of any team with drafted players from the 2020 draft. So pretty cool. Like that was a very special year for the Sens draft wise. So it's cool to see that paying off a little bit. Yeah. And I thought Gaudette was great. I thought he was all over it when he was on the ice. They were pretty positive. There's the stat right there. Tim Stutzla just running away with it, leading the draft class in points, getting all these other guys signed to long-term extensions. I think Stutzla kind of set the bar for everyone there. So, and spoiler alert, that's who I'm going to go with my Sens Central standout. I'm going with Tim Stutzla. I know I mentioned him earlier. I just want to give him a bit of a shout out just because I know he's the best player on the team most nights, but I felt like tonight against tough competition, those big defensemen on Vegas, like Pietrangelo, Hannafin, McNabb, Haig, like you can go down the list, like they're built like crazy. I thought Tim Stutzla did a really good job of staying on his feet. And I'm not saying that he's a diver by any means, but when there's some games where he will go down a bit easy when he tries to get a call. He got rewarded with one tonight, just a holding call by moving his feet. I thought he was harder on pucks. He was just fast and noticeable. I thought he was the most noticeable guy for the Sens out there in the offensive zone, just throwing his weight around. The power play, he's just running that from the half wall. I think it's early. I know it's been 7 games, but already to me, he looks like a better player than he was last year, which is very promising for the Sens going forward. So I'm really liking about that, the game that Stützle brought tonight. I know it didn't result in 2 points for the Sens, but he had 1 point, obviously, on Gaudette's second one. Probably should have had another assist on Batherson's goal, but Stützle is my guy. I don't know if he was maybe the most flashy player stats-wise tonight for the Sens. Didn't get a goal or anything like that. He was -1 at the end of the day, but I really, really liked his play, and I'm hoping that, it reflects it a bit. Like the defensive play from him and Tkachuk was a lot more detailed tonight, it felt like. So I'm happy with Stützle's play so far this year.
Yeah, he's been pretty consistent all year. Like, I feel like that's fair to say. But if we're going to talk about how good Timmy has looked and how consistent he's looked, Jack, not a great night in the dot for Timmy. 1 for 4, 25%. And on the season, Tim Stützle is 18%.
Yeah, he just doesn't take faceoffs. He just doesn't take draws. I don't know. Like, he's bad at them, first of all. He hasn't been good at them. And then you've got Tkachuk and you had Giroux on your wing for 2 seasons. Like, they just throw those guys in there forever. So he hasn't had any reps. But yeah, it's not his strong suit. I know you want your centerman taking faceoffs, but if Brady's out there with him, the way they move around, like positional, I don't get as hung up on that. I'd rather them just not use him in the dot at all. Maybe those 4 that he took might even just be because Brady got kicked out. It could be like for all intents and purposes, he's a winger off the faceoff, which is okay. I don't think it matters really.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Brady wasn't able to pick up the slack for him, though, as he goes 5 for 13 for 38%. So that's tough when that happens. But yeah, like, he's still a young centerman. When you have players like Giroux and Brady that can help you out there, that's an advantage. And that's, I don't want to say the main reason, because Brady and Giroux are obviously top players, but that's probably a big reason why at least one of them ends up on his line.
And I think the good thing, though, just positively for the team tonight, is the chart you just showed had Stützle and Tkachuk themselves positive on the defensive side. I don't know how they weigh that. Maybe it's shots for, shots against. Usually, to me, that lines up with what we're seeing on the ice, those hockey stat cards. But if you're going to lose all those faceoffs, you have to be able to defend well. And I thought they did. That's how they got the puck back. So it was a bit of a weirder night for them, but positive steps for the Sens in that regard. Tough night for Jake Sanderson. We don't have to look at that at the bottom of the chart there, but I mean, hey, maybe the Norris hype was a bit too much, and we can maybe just take a step back on Jake Sanderson. But that was not a great game from the top pair.
Yeah, and on nights like this, I tend to give Sanderson a pass just because he's so elite most other nights that unless it's egregiously bad, usually. I mean, I think a lot of times too, Jack, people forget how young of a defenseman he is just because he plays so poised and consistent most nights.
He turned 22 in August.
It's great.
He's a late birthday, isn't he? Like he was one of the youngest people in that 2020 draft. So the way he defends is fun. I think he looks great on the power play too. That's a step for Sanderson offensively. And yeah, from Adam there, to be fair, high excitement, seeing the Sens showing what they can. Yeah, it's the hope that kills you at the end of the day as a Sens fan. It really is. But I think you mentioned it too, Pilsy. This is a loss where if they're in the hunt in April and March, you're going to look back on it and say, how did you not squeak a point out? There's going to be tons of those games, but this is the first one this season I think we can look at and say that they let points slip away for sure.
Yeah. And just to finish off what Adam's saying here, he says, I want to look back at this loss as growth if we lose in the playoffs. So that's the thing. You're going to have these losses, and you're going to have to look at them and be like, all right, how can we be better? Where did things go wrong here? And the Ottawa Senators are going to have to do that. I wish we were sitting here talking about how they were able to shut the door on a contending team that's had their number, and we were talking about a 4-3 win instead and a 5-2 record. But the Sens are still 4-3, so and we're going to get into the chat a little bit more, how you guys are feeling, and we can fire off takes after the break here. But I just think that at 4-3, it is not time to panic yet. We're still in a good spot here. So although this is event cast, guys, stay strong, big picture. But if you're looking to really make an impact on immediate little picture stuff, single games, why not choose PrizePicks? It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and $1 billion in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You guys heard me right. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Best part is you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which players aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app, code LOCKEDONNHL, $50 after you play your first $5. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, guys, 6-4 loss to the Vegas Golden Knights in Vegas. Brandon Piller here with Jack Richardson, and we've broken this game down. We've done our Sen Central standouts. People in the chat, if you guys want us to hit on anything, let us know. Producer Ross will pull it up for us so we can get into it. But Jack, while we wait for some comments to get in here, let's talk a little bit about the next game on Sunday up against the Colorado Avalanche. Is this a game where you're looking at Ullmark and you're saying, all right, he's coming off a strain. We already had a couple false starts with him, thinking he was going to start in Utah, didn't. Now we give him the start in Vegas. Doesn't go the way you want. Would you be considering putting Ullmark? Tell me which spin zone you like better. Get Ullmark in that game right away so he has an opportunity to bounce back. You read off his comments. He seemed very much like he's putting this loss on him. So you don't want him to sit on that. You want an opportunity for him to get back. Or are you saying, hey, maybe let's take it slow and ease him into more full-time minutes? And Forsey's coming off a shutout, so why not go with the hot hand? Which of those spin zones do you like better?
I like the spin zone of get him back in there right away. I think I talked about Claude Giroux bouncing back a little bit after that mistake against New Jersey that ended up being the game winner, which, again, I know they scored very late in that game, but that ended up being the game winner. And then look how well he's played since. He's been shot out of a cannon, it feels like. So not saying that Ullmark will do the exact same thing, but when a leader like Ullmark is, I know he's new to the team, but he's an older guy. He's been there, this guy backstopped. I know it was a tandem, but he backstopped the best regular season team of all time. And that's not nothing. Like, he won a Vezina trophy for it. And that was 2 seasons ago. So he's not that far removed from it. The highs and lows of a season, I think you want your leader in there with you. I know Forsberg played well, but I think if you do that, it might invoke a little bit like you're panicking. I think if you were going to split the games, give Forsberg this one, ride the hot hand. If it goes like it did tonight anyway, you just say, you know what, we'll put Ullmark in. I know that if they did that, and I actually wanted to ask you this, does this game look any different to you if it's Forsberg in net? Same stats, same result, everything. But how different do you feel walking out of it if it's Anton Forsberg in net, right? That's kind of what I know there's been I was glancing at the chat, but there's a bit of pushback about the Ullmark criticism. That's my feeling is if it was Forsberg in net, it's a whole different vibe for us here, I think, tonight. I think maybe it's a little bit easier on Ullmark because he's new and he's a better goalie, but if the result is the same at the end of the day, then I don't think it should absolve that from, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying. And that's why I reference, like, last year, we would have just been like, another loss. Goaltending wasn't good enough. And if Forsberg would have had this start last year in a 6-4 loss, I don't think we're sitting here panicking because we're like, well, of course the Sens lost. It was bad goaltending, and they always lose to Vegas. But it's the fact that Ullmark finally gets back. The Sens play with a lead most of the time. And like you mentioned, Jack, for a lot of the game, they played well. It's not like they let it fall out from under them and then gave up midway through the game here. They were right there. and then it collapses at the very end. And they were able to put 4 goals up on the Vegas Golden Knights. I think if Forsberg is starting this game and it has this result, I think it's a very different narrative from Sens fans. And let us know in the chat if you agree with that or not. But since it's Ullmark and there's all this expectation, and again, I'm not going to say he lost us this game, but this is a game where you want your number one goalie to win you these games. You want him to be the reason you win, just like in Florida, where you're like, all right, this goalie gave us a chance to win and he got us to win. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen tonight. And I think that puts a bad taste in Sens fans' mouths.
And again, like I am a fan of Ullmark. I want to make that clear. It's just when you've got 2 of 3 games where it's been a little bit underwhelming, it's not early in the season anymore. Like 7 games is a decent sample size. He's played 3 of them, battled through an injury, maybe against Montreal, and then had to sit out for about 2 weeks. But Pills, I don't know if you caught it, but on the broadcast, they TSN had a great graphic early in the first period about the early starts for the Sens and getting that 5th win. That was the key graphic for me. And last year it took them until game 11 to get their 5th win. The year before that was game 14. The year before that, I think, was game 21. And the year before that was game 20. So it's been a steady increase. But I think the point of it is, like, we make a big deal about November, but it's been that 5th, 6th, 7th win that haven't come easy to this team. So this is where the November turn starts. Like, it's November next weekend. We're a week away here. So I'm just saying, like, get Ullmark in net, get your guy feeling good. And if he's not feeling good, that's another bridge to cross. But that's kind of where I'm at. It's like it feels like November's still a bit far away. They've had a very, very good start, all things considered, but they're 4-3, a couple losses in a row here. You're under 500 again in November. And we're in the same scenario. Like, it might feel like you're overreacting if you're going nuts about this game and talking to everyone in the chat, but there's a reason to. This is the movie that we've seen play over and over again, and this is the opening scene. So I'm not pressing the panic button yet. No panic button here, but a couple more games like this where they let it slip away, then you're all of a sudden out of the playoff picture at American Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and I from what I'm seeing from the chat, a lot of people aren't fully blaming Ullmark for the loss, and that's fine. Like I mentioned, I agree with that. But I think, Jack, I'm with you and most of the people in the chat. I think you got to put Ullmark back in Saturday or Sunday rather, unless there's a physical element to it with a strain. Who knows? Maybe. I mean, it's the type of thing he could tweak in morning skate and just it goes from 100% down to 90 and it's like, oof, I didn't like how I feel a little worse now. I got to take it easy.
That's the thing, though. I mean, I was never a goalie. I want to put that out there, but it felt like they were being very cautious with him. Like, the old Utah thing was a bit of a surprise. That wasn't
big time
supposed to be. Marillinen wasn't supposed to be there. So yeah. I think they thought he was going to be ready. If he wasn't 100%, he wasn't dressing. He didn't back up. So I would imagine he's healthy now. Like, he could get through a full game and be able to play again in 2 days. Like that's a reasonable expectation, right? So if he's still day to day, then don't put him in at all. I think is kind of so that would be a whole other discussion for me. Like, especially
but Jack, is it different that Sogard is injured and you've only got does the reinforcements change that argument or no?
I don't think so. No, I mean, especially because of how well Forsberg just played. If Forsberg was an absolute, black hole, like could not stop a puck, he's played all right. He's gotten better as the season's gone
coming
on.
Up.
And look at, like, Forsberg is 3-1, right? And Ullmark is 1-2. Like, that's kind of where we're at right now. So they've had up and down goaltending again. I'm just kind of pointing out, like, if Ullmark's not 100%, he should not have been in net. And I think that he was 100% because it seemed like they were being very, very careful with him leading up to tonight.
No, I think he was 100%, Jack. I'm more saying, like, the only way I would think it's okay not to play him Sunday is if something happens between now and Sunday where he doesn't feel
100%,
like physically. I agree. But then where I was going to get with that, and I'll read off Spanish Flea's comment here first. Upper management is forcing a culture change. We as fans need to change too. Don't panic or lose faith. Let's not creep back into last year's attitude. Go Sens, go. I love that. That's a Pillsy preaching patience type of perspective there. So I like that. But what I was going to get into was you have to play him for the mental part of goaltending, because he said, this loss is on me. And if you let him stew on this, he's going to lose that confidence. And Allmark's kind of whole thing is he's always been stuck in a tandem his whole career, even though he's a Vezina winning goalie on 90% of all NHL teams. He's easily the number one goalie. There's no talk about it. So now he finally gets to Ottawa. He obviously, him and his family like it there. They like the situation for Allmark. He knows he's going to be the number one guy. And then if after just one bad loss or a loss that he's not happy with, you yank him and you put Forsey in the next game, I think that probably messes with his psyche a little bit and shakes his confidence a little. You need to give guys like him the opportunity to bounce back and battle back. And we need to see him do it because we've only seen him play back-to-back games. And I'm not talking like one night, next night, but Florida, Montreal. And he hasn't had the opportunity to back up a loss. So I want to see Allmark in net on Sunday for sure, unless there's some sort of physical tweak holding him back.
That's actually a great point that he hasn't had the opportunity to bounce back yet. So I think
we got to give him the chance.
No brainer. He goes in against Colorado. And so I'll put it this way. If he's not in for whatever reason, if there's an injury, if there's just no injury and they put Forsberg in, I'm going to wave a red flag. I think in that sense, right? Like, I think that would be fair because this is the guy. I believe in Allmark. I think he's a stud goaltender, top 10 in the league. Everything points to that. So yeah, put him back in, let him battle back. And then if he, shuts the door in Colorado, which by the way, has been a black hole of goaltending. Like I mentioned, I know they've kind of turned it around recently, but they've had the worst goaltending in the league. So if he can go in and be a star and steal the show, or maybe just, get a great save percentage, win them the game in normal fashion, maybe like he did against Florida. Again, I feel like I'm sounding crazy. He doesn't need to do that. That's not the expectation, right? But if he could just save the ones that stop the momentum, like we talked about on the road in Colorado, in Vegas, I think that will go a long way. But again, this is the story of the night is in the first period, those 2 goals in 21 seconds. And then obviously the 2 goals in 1 minute at the end of the third period, it just can't happen. Like it just can't happen team wise. It's on everyone at the end of the day, right? It's on coaching, players, no timeout from Travis Green. So I'm rambling, but this is the Ventcast. That's what this is.
Yep. It's a time to vent. This is a good point here. Silver linings. This loss was against a Western team that doesn't give points to rivals, but still stings. I would have been happy with an overtime loss. Exactly. Like those loser points, they add up and they mean a big deal, especially when probably the Sens are going to be going for a wild card spot. So every single point matters when it gets up to it. So the Ottawa Senators lose this one 6-4. They don't get a loser point, unfortunately, and they're 4-3 on the season with the game upcoming in Denver. And that's not a bad travel move either from Vegas to Denver. Pretty simple. So the high altitude could be something you could use as an excuse, but I'm assuming they're going to get there early to try to get accustomed to the altitude. I feel like most teams, if they have that opportunity playing up against Vegas, that's what they do.
I have another spin zone. That overtime loss comment there kind of gave me another idea, and we're going to go more positive here. Okay.
I like it. We'll end the show on this.
We're going fully Atlantic Division tonight. I know it's way too early to look at the standings, way too early. But I referenced, in years past, taking a while to get the fifth win for the Sens. Yeah. I feel like a few years ago, the Bruins were running away with the division. Like they were already out of it in the playoffs. It felt like around now, if they were losing, it feels like every team in the Atlantic is 4-3. Like they're right there with every team. Yep. So I know it's super early, but there's the Lightning, Red Wings, Toronto all have 4 wins. So do the Sens. Like they're right in the mix with everyone. So it's not the end of the world, but it's just, you can't let this loss turn into 2 or 3. It's that kind of thing. So I think that's where we're going to see this new culture that someone else referenced and this coaching staff. They have like 5 coaches on the bench now. So there's so many people, so many new faces behind the scenes. So if they want to prove that they're a different squad this year, a different franchise moving forward, I think just bouncing back with a win against Colorado is the best way to do it.
Yeah, and let's hope they get that, as their next game is up against the Colorado Avalanche in Denver, like I mentioned, coming off a 6-4 loss to the Vegas Golden Knights. Thank you, everyone in the Postcast. The chat was bumping as it is always, all 157 of you. Thank you to the Glebe Central Pub, the official sponsor of the Postcast, our pub at 7079 Bank Street. Thank you to producer Ross. Jack, thanks for joining me. For Brandon Piller, this has been another Postcast presented by the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.